This is dralvin.com, the business of wisdom, where world leaders and thinkers do come to chat. Very fortunate to have Helen Peppe. Today's book is Pigs Can't Swim. First of all, at the beginning of the book, you have 4 epigraphs. I'd like for you to read those epigraphs and tell me why you decided to kick off your best-selling book with those 4 quotes.
The first one is by Stephen King. It's better to be good than evil, but one achieves goodness at a terrific cost. The second one is Thomas Hardy, and yet to every bad there is a worse. The third one is by Jane Goodall. The least I can do is speak out for those who cannot speak for themselves. And the fourth is by James Herriot. I wish people would realize that animals are totally dependent on us, helpless, like children, a trust that is put upon us. And the reason that I did this, the 2 by Jane Goodall and James Herriot obviously have to do with animals. And in my family, there was a lot of, we ate animals. My family ate animals and they raised animals. So there was a lot of slaughter and meat prep. And I found that really hard to watch because these animals, I had made them my friends and had hung out with them. So when they disappeared, that was very hard, and it seemed like nobody really cared what they thought because they didn't think animals thought and they needed to eat. So that's why I chose those 2. The one by Thomas Hardy, I love Thomas Hardy, a huge fan of his, and I put that there because even though everything can seem bad, it can always be worse. So when we look at our lives, it's good for us to think that even though we're unhappy, we could be even more unhappy, or other people could be more unhappy. So it kind of has a perspective that we should always try to take what we get, given to us and consider it from the wider view. And then the first one by Stephen King is, and if you've read the book, Stephen King is like a character in my book. I read his books all the time. And it's to show that we can try really hard to be good people. And but it's hard to be really good, but it's easy to be bad. So that's why they're there.
Now, when did you discover your love for animals? Because I think you started writing about animals and not eating animals at a very young age. So when did this love affair begin to establish?
I can't remember never not loving animals. And I did. I no longer ate them when I was 12, but I was writing stories about them living happily ever after, I think, as soon as I could get butcher paper from my parents and write. We had, pieces of scrap paper in our house. We had like that old kind of recycled math paper you get at school that we had in our house, and we had butcher paper, but we never really had artist sketch pads or anything like that. So I would take paper from this huge roll of butcher paper my parents had in the house in the basement where they wrapped the animals. So I would draw huge pictures on that of animals in fields and animals having fun, eating everything they would want to eat, and just being free.
When did you also develop, a thirst for knowledge, wisdom, and curiosity? When did you discover that was a part of your makeup as well?
Well, I certainly couldn't articulate it like that when I was young, and I knew that I wasn't happy doing what everybody else was doing, and that I took things literally, and I wanted to understand. For example, the pig is not swimming, and my parents are saying that they can't swim, and I would say, yes, he's swimming, but they would continue to say, no, he can't swim, he'll kill himself. That type of contradiction always bothered me. So, and that was like from the very beginning. So I would read books and try to understand why there were so many contradictions.
You remind me of a story I read about Thomas Edison, who was a very curious person. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story, but one day his mother found him in the barn sitting on an egg, and he thought just like the hen could sit on the egg and hatch and have a chick, he thought if he sat on the egg as well, that would take place, and that seems to kind of exemplify his type of curiosity. Have you heard about that story before?
I have heard about it. And there's a similar one with Jane Goodall, who was lost. Her parents couldn't find her. They were frantic. She was gone for hours and hours and hours, and they finally found her. And she had been in the hen house waiting for the chicken to lay the egg, and had just been watching and watching and watching so that she could figure out where the egg came from. So, yeah, it's curiosity, and I think that curiosity really drives us in empathy and compassion for animals.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it drives you. You know, a lot of people, are not curious. They seem to have a particular dogma or have an expression. Once you define yourself, you kind of confine yourself in terms of, I'm a Republican, liberal, Democrat, whatever. But when you begin to be curious, you're always evolving, you're always changing, you're always growing, and you seem to, the more you know, the less you know. Do you ever feel that way?
Exactly.
You ever feel that way?
Yes. Exactly. I think, I tell my kids all the time, 10 years ago I knew so much more than I know now. Now I don't know anything. And even what I do know, I don't trust that I know it. So I'm always looking it up to be sure that that's what I know. And there's more and more that I don't feel that I can understand fully, particularly with all the tragedy in this world. You want to try to understand what's driving people and what's going on. I really like that idea, that when we know what defines us, it confines us. That's really good. You're clever.
Well, thank you. I just think, a person may look at me or look at you and, only see gender or a race or culture, but they've never taken the time to go beyond the cover and say, well, what else about you or whatever. And then they seem to assume and make certain kind of assumptions. And I think one of the joys in life and being playful and creative, and as you know, most people who live vibrant lives are very playful, not necessarily in terms of playing games, but they are open for the magic of what this thing is called life. And,
yes.
For me to pigeonhole you to one particular dogma really limits you, and also it reveals my prejudices about you.
Right. And it limits them, but they don't realize that it's limiting them.
Right. Because I cannot assume, and one of the questions that I ask people quite a bit when I first interview, I almost ask you that. I ask, what is a person's background and expertise? And a lot of times people are startled that I ask them that, well, I'm an authority. Well, I'm not sure if you're authority or not. Because you say you are authority doesn't mean you're authority. Or a best-selling book is not necessarily a best-written book.
Exactly.
And so I'm always curious, I'm not going to assume that because you went to X, Y, Z, because sometimes a person may go to a certain school, they may learn the school dogma, the school song, but they don't have any creativity. If they're not preaching whatever that school dogma is, they're out of sorts. So I take everybody individually. I look at a blank sheet of paper, and that's one reason why I meet every day fantastic people like you, because I want to learn, I want to grow, and I want to develop.
I really like you.
I mean, that's what I do every day. I mean, you go on my website, the room I'm in right now, I have several thousand biographies. You're going to go on my shelf in a few minutes, and hopefully tomorrow I'll talk to someone about dogs can't fly, and I'll say, you know what? I talked to Helen yesterday, and she had a good book about pigs can't swim. Y'all should meet each other because y'all can get along together. And, before I talked to you, I was talking to Ireland, and, it's amazing how they write and drink a lot of Guinness beer. I mean, it's fantastic, so barley was harmed in the producing of that book. So every day I search for the great conversation, and I talk to some extraordinary people all over the world. 1 minute, Denmark, Australia. I mean, someone stays up I'm talking at 6 o'clock in the morning. They're up at 12 midnight, and they're willing to talk to me. I feel like that's very fascinating. Someone won't go to sleep to talk to me, and I'll get up early to talk to them. That's life.
Yeah, that is.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. It's supposed to be about you. Now.
No, that's fine. That is about me. I got up early to talk to you. I think it would have been easier to have talked at midnight.
Well, we could have scheduled it, I searched for the great conversation. Now, Just out of curiosity, does any of your family members, are they upset with you? Because sometimes when you talk about family, they feel like you perhaps airing out dirty laundry.
Well, with this book, it's tricky because when people read, they read about themselves and they read for themselves. So when my siblings read the book, even though it's not about them, they're reading it to find things that I'm saying about them. They're reading it with lots of suspicion and lots of worry and lots of hurt. And, I keep telling them it's not about you. And the reason I use the names that I do is so that anybody who reads the book can feel that it's their family and the people that they know and their parents, so they can, slide right in there. And when I have two siblings who have been really, upset about it, and they're in it like the least, really. And it's because when they read, they're not thinking about me. They're not thinking about, our parents. They're thinking about themselves and who they are. And like you said about identity, they're just so concerned and they can't see outside of who they think they are. It confined them so much that they've lost who they are. So yeah, they've had problems, but they're trying, to come around and be supportive. I think that's what I'm going to say in order to be positive.
Mm-hmm.
I have several siblings who are very, very positive and who helped me from the very, very beginning with memories and facts about what was going on when I was a child.
And when this becomes a major movie, and they're going to be saying, "Well, I want Denzel to play me. I want so all of a sudden it's going to change once you start making money." And they say, "You know what?
Maybe.
That's what's going to happen. Once you start making money, they're going to say, you know what? Let me tell you about this. I really didn't like you. And that's going to change it. All of a sudden, they be telling you who they want to star in their role or whatever. And then when you start flying them to Hollywood and all over the world, they say, "Sister, right on, right on, right on, right on."
Well, I hope that it does become a movie. That would be a lot of fun. And, if I did make money, I would feel like I wanted to give them some because, in a way, they were all part of its success. But I have two sisters who were just wonderful in the whole writing of this. So their response has been great. And then I have a brother who was really, really helpful. And then my mother and father didn't like it at first. Of course, they wouldn't. Nobody really likes to see themselves on paper. We all have this kind of myth of who we are. So when we see ourselves on paper through someone else's eyes, it's startling and hurtful, and your immediate go-to place is defense. No, I'm not like that. How could you do that? Kind of thing. But they're now trying to be really supportive too, and so I'm really lucky with that, and I'm really grateful to my parents for trying so hard. And they haven't read the book, and I don't want them to, but I'm really grateful. And I think, like I said earlier, that when my siblings or my parents would read the book, they can't see the bigger picture of what this is all about. They only see it from a very personal perspective, and so that's where they're angry or upset.
Sure. Well, we only got one more minute. Why don't you give me a brief synopsis of what you tried to accomplish by Pigs Can't Swim in 1 minute?
What I tried to accomplish is to show that no matter what happens to us, we can find the humor in it. And we can look back at it, and we don't have to allow it to claim us and define who we are and confine who we are. We can laugh about it and go on and be bigger and better people.
Wow, that's very profound, very deep, so early in the morning.
I know, I stole it from you, though.
I had my yogurt in some philosophical perspective. Well, this particular chat will be featured at dralvin.com, the website, dralvin.com on Facebook, and also the conversation will continue on Twitter at Dr. Alvin Jones. That's where we discover wisdom, one brilliant mind at a time. Give me a final thought and then tell me how to get a copy of the book.
You can get a copy of the book through any independent bookstore. You can get it online. You can get it from Da Capo, the publisher. And for my final thought, I just hope that people read. That's the biggest thing, is just to read and read and read and read even more.
Well, thank you so very much for being on today's broadcast. And next time I go to the pool, I'm going to see whether or not pigs can swim.
Thank you for having me.